Sì.
Have I met everyone before? Or
the former director.
Yes.
Before,
yeah.
Before
the previous one, yeah. I met you for sure, and you also. I met you too before. So I think everyone knows me from before.
No, I am only an old retired man. The dog and the tomatoes.
allora cominciamo.
Prendi quanto questo. Ce la fai Federica a portare il microfono verso parlare tutto.
Perché è quella console. Aspetta, basta qui, no? Ma va bene qui?
Some more people joining on this. Remember to take some pictures.
Sì, ma il telefono, perché il mio ha
The things that is going to ask
for... I can do it.
I can do. Okay, so we can start whenever you want.
Allora, mi sentono loro da...
Sì, con quel microfono.
Allora, buongiorno a tutti, buongiorno a chi è qui in presenza e chi è su Zoom, sul collegamento dell'AMMA. È un piacere per me presentarvi Guadalupe Ortiz, professoressa dell'Università di Alicante, con la quale abbiamo una collaborazione ormai da diversi anni. Lei e il suo gruppo di ricerca sono dei sociologi e che si occupano di studiare quegli aspetti degli impatti, delle vulnerabilità sociali dovute e legate alle catastrofi, principalmente agli eventi idrometeorologici intensi. Loro hanno studiato poi anche gli impatti sociali di grandi infrastrutture, di opere in dighe, in Sud America e nella penisola iberica. Ma ora qui parliamo più che altro degli impatti e delle vulnerabilità legate alle alluvioni principalmente. E su questo tema delle alluvioni che noi abbiamo trovato una sintonia, perché noi ci occupiamo degli aspetti fisici in generale, dei rischi idrometeorologici, e loro si occupano invece degli aspetti sociali, che completano il quadro, perché evidentemente anche dalle esperienze, dagli eventi recenti che ci sono stati in Toscana, in Emilia-Romagna, in Italia, ma anche nei paesi meno sviluppati, l'analisi e l'assessment del rischio e anche degli impatti solo da un punto di vista fisico lascia aperti molti punti di interrogazione che possono essere studiati e compresi. È necessario comprenderli per poter poi mettere in opera delle metodologie e delle strategie di riduzione del rischio solamente attraverso dei metodi che siano più legati al mondo delle scienze sociali. E quindi Guadalupe è visiting professor presso IBE e l'AMMA durante questo mese di luglio, per avere degli incontri con delle autorità locali, dei comuni che hanno sperimentato degli eventi alluvionali e per testare degli strumenti che sono stati sviluppati dall'Università di Alicante in Spagna e in altri paesi lusofoni o di lingua spagnola, testarli anche in Italia per vedere se prima di tutto possono essere utilizzati con soddisfazione da parte delle amministrazioni locali, e poi anche in una prospettiva di migliorarli e di allargare, diciamo, questa sperimentazione anche all'Italia nell'ambito di nuovi progetti. La sua presenza qui ha dato luogo alla possibilità di organizzare questo seminario, e quindi senza tardare altro passerei la parola a Guadalupe. Il seminario è in inglese e vi ringrazio tutti per la presenza.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you again for welcoming me here. Sorry that I speak in English. My Italian is improving, but not there yet. Next time, I hope I will be able to speak more in Italian. I'm working on it. It's a pleasure for me being here again. I hope I'm not repeating myself too much, because I know I met some of you before, but I think that from the previous time I came, we've progressed a lot in the project, as Veri says. You know that we've made huge advances, and I'm going to, first of all, Vieri and Beniamino, they thought that it would be a good idea to talk a bit about what environmental sociology is. We call ourselves environmental sociologists, and it would be, it's probably a field that's far from the fields in which you usually work. And we are really used to working with people from our disciplines, and it's always great to have a feedback from other colleagues from different fields, and that's one of the purposes of this seminar, to have an informal talk so that I introduce you to the work that we do at the University of Alicante, and maybe we can find common ground for connection or collaboration. It's been my fourth time here, my third. I'm losing count. That's a good thing. That's a good sign. I feel at home now. But we've established this collaboration for the last years, in which Vieri and his team and Francesca and Valentina Grasso, they have been really supportive with this project that I'm going to be showing in a minute. But first of all, if you want, we can talk a bit about what environmental sociology is, or obviously I'm going to simplify things a lot. I'm going to, if any environmental sociologists heard me now, they would be, they would look me badly, because I'm going to simplify things very much. But obviously, if I have to define environmental sociology, that would be the subdiscipline of sociology in which we try to understand the connections, the interactions between environment and society. That would be the simplest definition of environmental sociology. But obviously, this is a very complex field of work. First of all, because it's interdisciplinary in itself, and because it has many different edges and approaches and theoretical frameworks and so on. But again, if I have to simplify, I would say that environmental sociology focuses on this relationship between environment and society from three main lines of work. First of all, understanding the anthropogenic nature of environmental issues, the fact that environmental problems have their origin, the cause in society. It's human action, it's social action, which is the way that we call it in sociology. It's social action, which is creating many of the issues, the topic, the problems that you and me try to understand a bit more in our daily work. How our values, social values, creating these problems. What do we value? How do we value that? How do we value the environment? How do we value economy? How do we value progress or equality, or all these elements, classical elements of sociology that have a clear place in the case of environmental problems. But not only do we think about the cause, the human cause, the social cause of environmental issues, but also we look to this relationship the other way around, from the other side, which are the consequences, the social consequences of environmental issues. Inequality is one of the main topics here in environmental sociology. Inequality is a huge field of work, in the sense that we understand as sociologists that not all social groups, not all communities, not all societies experience environmental issues the same way in their consequences. And when we talk about climate changes, that is very, very clear that not everyone is going to suffer or is suffering the consequences of climate change in the same way. So that would be one of the stars of environmental sociology, the understanding of how inequality appears in this interaction between environment and society. But when we talk about risks, which is one of the things that we're going to be talking today, because it's probably the common ground that we all have, when we talk about risks, this relationship becomes even more clear. If we understand risk as the combination of these three main elements, hazard, exposition, and vulnerability, the connection between society and the environment becomes very clear. And that's where environmental sociology overlaps with sociology of risks, which is another subdiscipline of sociology. And the same way natural sciences study environmental impact assessment, in the social sciences we try to understand, and this is one of our main lines of work, we try to understand better the social impacts of environmental processes of change, let's put it that way. So we've been working for a long time on social impact assessment, as Vieri said, applied to large infrastructures, for example, not only infrastructures, for example, productive development, or for example, tourism development. The social impacts of tourism would be one of our lines of work too. And lately we've been applying social impact assessment methodologies to the understanding of natural disasters, mainly floods. How are floods experienced by different social groups? And this is where social vulnerability comes into place. And this is the approach that we usually take when trying to understand the way that different communities experience natural disasters. So we have this causal element of environmental sociology, we have this consequential element, the impacts, the consequences of environmental problems on different groups, on different communities. And because we are looking at this real world problem, environmental sociology, at least from our point of view, I would say that it has a very applied approach, in the sense that we try to use that knowledge to be more efficient, more effective in managing environmental issues or social environmental issues, as we understand this social dimension of the environmental crisis. So especially in our team, in the work that we do at the University of Alicante, we have this very significant applied approach to provide with useful tools for a better management of environmental issues. So this would be my simplification, my huge simplification of what environmental sociology is. Sorry for that. But I think it gives a clear idea of what sociologists bring into the table. What do we contribute with to the understanding of environmental problems? But when it comes to climate risks or hydrometeorological risks or climate-related risk issues, as I said before, if we try to understand risk as the combination of these three elements, we can also see the different ways in which environmental sociologists contribute to the understanding of risks. Most of all, we are going to focus on vulnerability, as I said before, but not only. I know that natural sciences are the ones that have really much to say on the hazard point of view. You understand the way they function, the way they work, their characteristics, their nature, their origin, how to predict them, how to modelize them. That's not our work on that, obviously. But if we can contribute in some way to the understanding of the hazard, that would be mainly working on the perception of hazards by population, how to, I think you lost it, right? Sorry, we have two screens. The one that's being shown on the streaming conference, and the one here in the room. No, you went. You have to go back. Can you just skip the presentation? Yeah. Can you go out? Yes. Just a minute. Sorry. No, but no. I think you need to stop the presentation there, okay, and then go back there, here. Sorry for that. Sorry. Yeah. Yes. So, as I said before, one of the things that with which we can contribute to understanding hazards better, that would be on the perception part. How do people understand or perceive floods, droughts, heat waves, whatever risk we're talking about. But that would be really, really connected with vulnerability, and we will be talking about that in a minute. But if we can contribute with something to the understanding of the hazard, that would be this line of work that I was telling you about, related to the social origin of hazards, the way that they are not only natural phenomena, but probably mostly social phenomena in their cause, in their origin. But as I said before, social scientists, most of all, we are going to focus on these other two elements of risk, which are exposition and, in our case, vulnerability. But there's a lot of, there's a good community of social scientists working on the exposition. How are different groups exposed differently to risks and to those hazards we were talking about? So, and inequality, again, is one of the big topics here, the unequal exposure of communities. And this is also going to be related to vulnerability. It's usually vulnerable groups that are the more exposed to some hazards because they occupy flood-prone areas or landslide prone areas, low quality lands. So land occupation, unequal exposure, and the social determinants of exposure, which is very closely connected to vulnerability, are also some of the topics. But again, what we mostly work on is the vulnerability side of risk. Obviously, social vulnerability, material physical vulnerability is something that other disciplines are working on. In our case, we are talking about how different groups present different levels of vulnerability to floods. In our case, in the case of our recent research, we're talking about floods. If we understand very broadly social vulnerability as those social factors, economic, political, cultural, institutional factors that determine or influence the capacity that people have to prevent, prepare, respond, adapt, recover from the impacts of a hazard. Then we have the three main lines of work that I've just given you with this definition, the two main lines of work within the social vulnerability field of work. First of all, the social determinants of vulnerability. What are those social aspects, those social factors that are going to define a community as vulnerable or not? And these are not universal. These are not the same for every risk. It's not the same. You can be very vulnerable to floods, but not to earthquakes or not to tsunamis or whatever. So there has been a huge, actually, I would say that this has been the star of the show within the work of social sciences in terms of social vulnerability for many, many years. This study on social vulnerability indexes was trying to do this, to understand what are those elements that define people as vulnerable to specific types of risks. So there has been a lot of quantitative research, a lot of social demographic research on this matter. And more recently, and this would be the field in which we have been working on for the last years, I would say that we've been focusing more on these two other elements of the definition, which are the social capacities that people have, probably because of those social determinants that I was telling about, maybe because they are old, maybe because they have low income, maybe because they have bad education, or whatever social determinants. But what we're trying to understand is what are the specific capacities that people lack or that people need so that they can prepare, prevent, mitigate, adapt, react, respond, adapt, better, or recover from hazards, or actually from the impacts of those hazards. And this is where the third element comes into place, the social impacts. what we are trying to do when studying vulnerability is to try to reduce the impacts so that people don't suffer, don't experience the impacts of a flood, for example, in such a severe way, so that they can maybe be more resilient or maybe be better adapted to the changes that are coming, right? So in the projects that I'm going to show you, I will be focusing more on these two last elements. But there are many others that try to cover all of them. For example, when we talk about risk communication, this is a huge line of research within social sciences related to risks. But in this case, we're trying to cover all the spectrum. We're trying to cover the hazard, the exposition, and vulnerability. And we also work on this kind of global approaches to risk. So what I wanted with this talk was to present you some of the work that we do in our research team at the University of Alicante. And I'm going to do it with 3 examples. I'm going to summarize them as much as I can, because they cover different elements of what we've been talking about. First of all, one small project on risk communication that we did some years ago before, and this is important, before the Valencia floods. And as I will tell you how this was important. It was made after some severe flood events in 2019 on the southern province, the southern coast of Alicante, the southern region of the Comunidad Valenciana, which is our region. Then, which is the project that brought me here, the AquaSoc project, that if you've met me before, I probably talked about that in previous meetings, but now we are almost finishing it, so we have more information to tell about this. And then a future project, which is the evolution of AquaSoc, which hopefully will be AquaCap, which is the next project that we're trying to get so that we can continue the work that we've been doing with AquaSoc. In the first one, as I said, we're working with risk communication. The second one, we're combining 2 of these main lines of work that I told you about, social impact assessment and capacities assessment. And AquaCap will be more focused on capacity buildings, on the creation or support of local authorities and institutions to increase the resilience of their communities in terms of preparation for future flood events. So the first one, and very briefly, I'm not going to give you all the details, just a general view of what we did. After those severe flood events that we had in September of 2019 in Vega Baja, which is the southern region of Comunidad Valenciana, in the southeastern parts of Spain, after those severe floods, the regional institutions realized that they needed to improve their communication strategies. They had been working on an app, a mobile app for the 112 service, the regional 112 service. And so, but also, and this is important, at that time, all the conversations and the preparations to establish the current ES alert system were taking place. So we didn't have the ES alert system yet. People were just talking about the possibility of the ES alert system at that point. And when the Spanish Civil Protection Service was creating the draft protocol for this national alert network, they included this caption in the text in which they said that the system should count on a library of standard texts, so that emergency services wouldn't have to spend their time in a critical moment thinking about how do we write this, what do we include in the message, what message should we send, what topics should we cover. They thought that it would be useful to have this previous catalog of standard messages. And so the Valencian regional government at that point, they thought, okay, we can do it. We don't have it in Spain. No one has it. They have been doing some research. They didn't find something like that, either in Europe or other countries. So they hired us to do this warning messages catalog. For this, and I'm not going to bore you with the methodology, but let's say that what we did was to, because we had the connection with the regional government, they gave us access to the calls, the emergency calls that the 112 services had received during the flooding events. So they gave us the database, anonymized, obviously, but they gave us all the messages, all the calls that they received. And with that, for us sociologists, that was gold, because it's a kind of database that you don't usually have access to. And it was going to tell us what were the informative needs that people had during an emergency like this. The thing is that we wanted, or they wanted, the regional government wanted a catalog that would cover many different topics, so that if the problem during a flood was mainly related to traffic, they would have messages related to traffic. If it was household problems, then there would be messages regarding household problems. But also they wanted them for social media, because remember that at the point we didn't have the ESRF system. So what we did, we analyzed those calls. In those calls, well, I didn't tell you that one of the reasons why the regional government thought they needed this is because during those severe flood events, the 112 services collapsed, in the sense that they weren't able to manage the volume of calls that they received during those days. So, but why? Because people were asking for information. And as you know, 112 is not there to give information. It's there to redirect the emergency to the authority who has the competence, whether they are health services or fire workers or police or whatever. So they wanted to improve the way they were informing people. Okay, so that people didn't have to call 112 to ask for information and then collapse the lines. So we took all the calls, we extracted those related to the event. There were 4,000 calls, and we used calls from some days before the emergency and some days after the emergency. For 10 days, the floods were happened in 2-3 days. So we covered a longer time for that, because we wanted the catalog to cover the whole cycle of the event, so that we could have messages for the preparation stage, the action stage, the response, and the recovery stage. And this is what we do. Obviously, we also looked for other sources. We looked for different resources that other emergency agencies had in the past. And we came up with this catalog of messages, organizing these 4 sections that are related to the different stages of this disaster cycle: the prevention, the preparation, the response, and the recovery. I don't know if the link is going to work. You can try just to. It's open access. Anyone can access this catalog. It's on our webpage. You can check it if you want. You will see how we organize all the topics of all the needs that we found within the calls, but also in these other sources to create the messages. And for this, we also prepared the methodology for the design of the messages, following a model for a 3-step message, different sources and recommendations from different institutions, the FEMA, the German emergency services, 112, and so on. So we created a catalog of around 97, if I'm not wrong, 97 messages that cover all the cycle of the event, all those topics, and that had these very well thought structure. But again, just take into account that this wasn't meant for the ESLR system. This was meant for social media and the app of the emergency services, which they were working on at the moment. And then we tested it. Obviously, there were some, you can, Francesca, yeah, thank you. We tested them with people, obviously, with people that were in flood-prone areas, so that we could understand, we could find ways to improve or to know if the messages were understandable, where they were salient, they were actionable, the different characteristics that a warning message must have. But also there were topics that were that we needed experts to test, because we are not experts in health issues nor in traffic issues or different areas that needed specialized knowledge. So we tested them also with specialists in these different areas: fire services, civil protection, health services, and so on. So that's one of the things that we did. We have all of this published. You can look at these are one of the two main publications that we got from this project. If you're interested in looking at the methodology with more detail and so on. Unfortunately, and as I said at the beginning, the government changed some years ago. We were hired by the previous government, and the new government didn't even know that this existed when the Valencian floods happened. So none of this was used. And one of the problems actually during the Valencian flood events were that it took them hours to decide on a message to send through the EES alert system. It only got to the mobile phones at 8 p.m. when the floods had started, and the red warning was up from the day before, and that early morning at 7 a.m. we were already in red alert, and then they just sent the message when many people had already lost their lives. But if something, if I can present the results of a research team with more details, that would be talking about this current project that brought me here, that I've told you about in previous meetings. And actually, I think I presented it before we started, so now I can show you where we got from there. So this project, in this project, we're trying to combine these two lines of work that I told before: the social impact assessment of floods and social capacities to floods. So the idea, because these are two incipient lines of work within the literature, we already have some work on social impact assessment of floods, but not very systematized, and it's very scattered throughout the literature. So one of the things that we wanted with this project, which has been funded by the Ministry of Science and Innovation and the regional government of Valencia, in this project we wanted to exhaustively catalog the social impacts of floods. How do communities experience floods? We understand social impact as the experience, physical or cognitive, of the consequences of process of change. And in this case, the process of change was a flood event, or different flood events, because we work with different case studies. And we have this theoretical model that I'm not going to bore you with, in which we connected impacts and capacities, in the sense that if you understanding or under the hypothesis that you suffer an impact in a way, a specific way, because you have or you don't have specific capacities that can have that very different forms, as I will be telling you in a minute. But social impacts and capacities, the social capacities are in the origin or the causal element of the impact. The more capacities you have, the more able you will be to prepare, respond effectively, or recover from the consequences of a flood. So we wanted this project, as I said before, to have an applied approach to it, in the sense that it provided local managers, local risk managers, useful tools to identify areas for improvement in terms of social capacitation. which is the atlas of tool that I will be showing you in a minute. And Vieri told you that we have been testing here also in Tuscany. So the problem was, I think I'm going to, I don't know how I'm with time. How much time do we have, Vieri? Are you?
0.
Okay, but I don't want to bore you too much with this. What we had found in the literature was that there was a very fragmented approach to social vulnerability. Either you were thinking of impacts, or you were studying capacities, or you were studying the social determinants mainly, which is the main topic in social vulnerability. You were trying to understand or catalog or describe the determinants of social vulnerability in a quantitative, indexed, social demographic way. The problem with this is that it was very far from the practice of daily flood risk management. When we talk to local managers about social vulnerability indexes or social impacts or social capacities, at least in Spain, what we get is this look in the face like, what are you talking about? I don't understand what you're talking about. Tell me about how to clean the river, tell me how to canalize or channel the water, tell me about those things. I understand those things, but when it comes to social dimension, they are a bit lost. And that's normal because they don't usually have that professional profile. So we wanted to help them to incorporate into the local plans, local management plans, the social dimension, which was completely missing. We had been analyzing the content of local risk management plans, and the social thing was just not there. So we wanted to help them into doing what the international institutions have been saying. The Sendai framework, they are saying that we need to capacitate communities, that we need to do capacity building, and so on. But that's not reaching the local level, at least in Spain. So we wanted something to help in this. So we wanted to connect the impacts with capacities so that we could identify which capacities are needed to prevent the social impacts. For that, we use different case studies with different severe flood events, both in Spain and at an international level, in United States, in Brazil, and here in Italy. But mainly our research case studies were in Spain with different kinds of floods, so that we could identify priorities for action for those local managers, so that they could start understanding what they should be starting working on, put their hands on. For this, and I've jumped to the end of the project so that I don't bore you with all the details, we've created this network, and each of these circles that you see on the screen, these are social impacts and social capacities, and we've created these connections by talking to many people, many people, both affected populations in this different case study, experts, local experts, technicians, at local level, experts from different fields. And in these in-depth interviews in which we talked with them about the different social impacts that they had experienced, they were connecting these impacts with the capacities they would have needed so that they could have responded or prepared in a better way to those impacts. We asked them, what do you think you would have needed so that these hadn't happened to you? When they had described the impacts that they had experienced, we also asked them, what do you miss? What did you miss at that point? What would you need in the future not to experience this impact in this way, right? So this network, we've analyzed this with network analysis and so on, but the purpose of the network was to connect all these 70-something impacts and 40-something categories of capacities so that they could feed an online tool for self-assessment for local managers. When I talk about social impacts, I talk about 72 different categories of impacts regarding these 7 large areas. Impacts related to domestic life and economy, the productive sector, mobility, communications and supplies, physical and psychological health, educational and cultural services, emergency services, and community cohesion and conflict. So we have different impacts within these categories so that we can have this exhaustive identification of what can happen to communities when a flood event happens. And we did the same with social capacities. When we talk about social capacities, we're talking about knowledge capacities, what people know about self-protection, about risks, about the legal framework even, or capacities related to psychological and attitudinal characteristics of people. Network or community capacities are essential, and that has been shown many examples in almost every case study that we've analyzed. The network is what saves people. If you have people that you can rely on, that can help you during the crisis, you have better odds to recover and to confront the impacts. Institutional governance capacities, economic capacities, services capacities, and communicative and technological capacities. All of these, as I said, disaggregated into 43 different capacities, which are the green dots that you saw before in the network. But what I wanted to tell you about was the AquaSoc tool. The AquaSoc tool is an online platform aimed at local managers so that they can self-assess the social impacts that they are exposed to at a local level and the social capacities that they need to develop so that they can prepare themselves better for the next flood event and reduce, mitigate, or even erase those impacts. That's more difficult, I know, but at least prepare better, be better prepared for floods. In the AquaSoc tool, which we are currently testing, we still have some technical issues, especially this week we've had some technical issues, and that's why I'm not showing it now, because the company is working on fixing some problems that we found. The idea is that someone goes in here, they would find all those categories of impacts that I told you before. Domestic life, blah, blah, whatever. You can choose all of them, just some of them, depending on what you want to assess. And then you would go through each of the impacts within each category, assessing them in terms of intensity, in terms of level, number of population or volume of population that has been affected or can be affected by that impact, or how hard it is to manage. If something is very hard to manage on my own as a local manager, maybe I need help from the outside, that's something I have to work on, right? And so they go through all the impacts, it takes some time, especially if you want to go through all the impacts. It's a bit of a draining process, as Vieri knows. And then you do the same with the capacities. You're going to go through all the categories of capacities. You're going to assess how much has your municipality already worked on that. How strong are we in that capacity? Maybe I have already worked very hard in improving my communication systems. So I have that capacity. So that capacity won't be in my priorities because it's already been very well worked on. But people will find probably many capacities that they have never even thought about. And that's one of the ideas of AquaSoc. Not only the results, but the learning process. For people who might have never thought about the social dimension of risk management, because they didn't have the chance to do it, not because they didn't want to. So AquaSoc is going to show them what do we mean by social impacts, what do we mean by social capacities. It's going to give them examples for that. And most of all, in the results section, you're going to find a hierarchy, a ranking of priorities for action. That is going to combine that network that we saw at the beginning with all the punctuations that we got from the analysis, so that we can identify which capacities have more strength in acting across the whole network. And they're going to identify the priorities for action. They're going to find the very urgent ones, the medium urgency ones, and the least urgent ones. So they're going to have this ranking. And most of all, the idea is that Aquasoc provides with examples for action. So if you need to work on your communication systems, I'm going to give you some examples of the things you can do. So far, this is the point that we've reached. But our purpose is that in the next project, the one that we have just sent for to see if we are lucky and get the funds for it, the idea is to improve, most of all, the actions within Aquasoc. First of all, we want to validate it in other case studies. That's why we are really happy that some municipalities here have found the project interesting and they want to collaborate with us in the next project. And for that, I have to thank Francesca, I have to thank Vieri, Valentina, and all the team, because they really did a great job in helping us find possible collaborators. But what we want is to create a full catalog of social capacity building actions for flood risk reduction. The idea is that for every capacity, they not only have examples for action, but a catalog of real life actions in the form of experiences that other people have implemented in different parts of the world. So if we need to incorporate, I don't know, a psychological attention protocol within our management plans, we are going to try to find examples, real world examples, so that we can link them within the page, so that people can find references, find examples of what to do or how to do it, and then adapt them to their own context and realities. So this would be the main thing that we want to do with AquaCap, this catalog, so that we classify and we collaboratively evaluate each action. So we've created this evaluation, this assessment system for capacity building actions that we would like to implement, so that we don't only say good things, things that sound really good, but that they have already been tested or assessed, so that they are feasible, not only nice to hear, but also feasible for local managers. And then obviously transfer and dissemination. So I'm not going to, if you're interested, I will give you more details on the AquaCap project, but I think in case they give it to us, then we will have the chance in the future to talk more about that. The only thing, one of the cool things for me of this project is that we are using this model for the evaluation of capacities, the COM-B model, that it makes a lot of sense from an environmental sociology point of view, in the sense that we are understanding the capacities within the social structure. It's not enough to have one capacity, that the capacity exists. It's also needed an environment, a social environment, that makes it possible for you to enact that capacity. In the case of Valencia, that was really, really clear. They were saying, stay at home, don't move. First of all, they said that too late. People had already gone out of the house, but there were companies saying, people, no, you have to come to work or you will be fired. So that person had the information, the capacity of the information, the knowledge, they had it. They knew they had to stay at home, but they didn't have the chance to stay at home. They didn't have the opportunity, which is the O in this model, the opportunity to enact that capacity. So capacities are not the only thing we need. We also need to create the opportunities and the motivations for a behavioral change, which is what we look for when we talk about actions, capacity building actions. We want people to behave differently or in a specific way, in a safer way. So if we want to create that behavior, we not only need to understand what capacities to build, but what opportunities and motivations should also build. So this is my passion now. This is all I think about right now. So I hope we get the funds and I will be able to tell you more in the future. So this is what we do. That's everything on my side. Also, I wanted to tell you a bit more about these platforms that we belong to, just in case you think that you're working on things that maybe have some connections to what we do. We have this Socioeconomic Observatory of Floods and Droughts at the University of Alicante, at the Institute of Water and Environmental Sciences, to which we belong. I'm the the deputy director of this institute at the University of Alicante. We also belong to the International Network of Socio-Environmental Studies. We are not only sociologists, there are people from many, many disciplines, just in case you're interested. And most of all, currently we have very active projects with these two platforms. The Society for Risk Analysis Europe, to which I belong, and I'm currently the president of the Iberian chapter. There are different regional chapters within this society. It's a scientific society, a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary society. There are many engineers, biologists, sociologists, psychologists, political science experts, anthropologists, geographers, people from every discipline. And for me, it's been a great discovery in the last years, and we've been able to collaborate with many, many people through this platform. So I would, and also next year I will be hosting the annual conference of the Society for Risk Analysis Europe in Alicante. So you're all invited. If you want to come to Alicante, it will be a great way to, it's a good excuse because you will be connecting with people from from your area of expertise too. And also, we are, in case you're working on risk communication, this is more specific. In this SRA Europe, we work on risks from many different angles. We are currently involved in this Coast Action, the Alert Hub Action, which is focused on risk communication, in case you are working on that. And it's around 220 people right now working on this. It's really active, and the idea is to identify the practices and challenges of risk communication in Europe currently. We are looking for more people, mainly also practitioners, not only researchers. So if you know someone that could be interesting, I can give you more interested in this. I can give you more information on the action. And that's it, I think. Thank you for listening, and I hope I didn't bore you too much. Thank you very much.
Credo che abbiamo qualche minuto per delle domande, se ci sono in sala o se c'è qualcuno su Zoom che vuole scrivere, no? Qualche domanda. Cominciamo dalla sala.
Again, thank you very much, because I know these are not the best days of the year to join a seminar. You're probably thinking more about the well-deserved rest. So thank you very much for joining.
In Italian or in English? Just curiosity. In our studies on analysis of cause, and also in the creation of a catalog of different messages and so on, had we considered also or integrated studies on ontology, in the sense that the same walls or the same perception of events can be described with different concept and also.
Actually, we don't, but this is one of the things that as sociologists we are always looking to. We're always trying to understand things from the point of view of different people. So the different understanding definitions of the word risk even, but something that could be seen as something as objective as a flood is actually not objective at all from a perception point of view. For me, that's one of the things that I regret not having the time to do in this project. But this is always something that I have there. When I have the time, I need to get on this, because for me, it's really, really interesting. When you talk to people, you find all these different ways of describing, of conceptualizing, understanding things that for them are absolutely clear and just a matter of yes or no. This is the way I say, and that's it. Especially when you talk to experts. But also when you talk to local people, when you talk to the affected populations, what they understand by flood or by risk, or it's social impact. Obviously, it's we don't usually talk with them with these words that I've been using in this presentation, but you can see how there are so many different understandings of something as basic as a flood, which is. But it's for some people. Well, this was not a flood. This has happened. It happens every year. This is not important. But that's important too. If they don't see if they get used, or if they have such a normalized awareness of floods, that's going to explain a lot of things in terms of action. So unfortunately, no, we haven't been able to, because we haven't had the time, but we have very rich information there in the interviews that we've recorded. All the information is there, and at some point in my life, I hope I will be able to get into that and to understand them in depth.
No, non c'è nessuna domanda?
No, online no.
No.
Beh, direi niente, se non ci sono altre domande, chiudiamo.
Cosa?
Guadalupe è ancora qui fino al 12 di agosto. Abbiamo in programma ancora c'è una domanda?
Sì, Marina.
Vai.
Marina.
No, it's just a piece of information. First of all, thank you, Guadalupe, because it's a pleasure to listen to you once again. And I see that you made a lot of improvement and a lot of other more work after the previous meeting we had. And I'm sorry I couldn't come today. I only want to ask you if you can share the two articles that you were citing in, I think it were from 2024, if you can share the reference. Maybe you can leave to Pieri and then, yeah.
For sure.
And
we have some more. We have some in Spanish too, but in those two, in one of them, actually, we combine our work with the 112 calls with the work that other colleagues at the University of Alicante, some geographers, did also with that same database. They localized the calls. Because they had the location of each call where they were coming from. So they mapped them and they identified some areas that were not included in official cartography, flood cartography. So they were able to identify vulnerable areas through the calls, and they found deficiencies or weaknesses in official maps. And we combine those two works, the mapping and cartography work, with the creation of the messages. That's the one International Journal of Disaster Risk Reduction. And then the other one is more focused on the methodology that we use to create the messages and to pilot test the messages. That one is Environmental System and Decisions Journal. And for sure, I will send Vieri the links, and so that he can send them to you.
Thank you. Thank you
for the interest.
Quindi niente, dicevo, Guadalupe resta fino al 12, abbiamo degli incontri ancora con Campi, con l'amministrazione, con il sindaco, con la protezione civile per il test di Acquasoc. E poi dovremo raccogliere ancora i feedback dei comuni di Sesto e di Scandicci, con i quali abbiamo già cominciato a lavorare, per diciamo, riassumere un pochino l'esperienza delle amministrazioni locali nell'utilizzo, nel provare, nel testare lo strumento, e per raccogliere anche il loro interesse e la loro adesione per la fase successiva. Avevamo anche provato a contattare il Comune di Firenze, anzi l'area metropolitana e Prato, però non ci sono stati riscontri, ma i comuni più piccoli e dove c'è anche un contatto diretto è molto più facile. Bene, ringrazio tutti e grazie.
Grazie.
Ciao, thank you for joining.